Welcome friends, it's Jason from the Liberty Bunker. The days of austerity are now over. This from the Telegraph. Chancellor declares the end of austerity with £13.8 billion cash bonanza. Let's take a close look at this one. The years of battling the deficit are over as Sajid Javid declares the end of austerity and announced a £13.8 billion spending spree that the Chancellor said shifts the economy from a decade of recovery to a decade of renewal. The 4.1% rise in real terms day-to-day spending is the biggest increase in 15 years, he said, telling the Commons that the Treasury could afford a spending spree because of the past decade that spent cutting the deficit. As a result, he will scrap the fiscal rules that set out by his predecessor Philip Hammond and set out new plans for the public finances in the coming months. Public spending will rise 38.6% of GDP in 2020-21, a significant rise from the 38.1% last year and 38.3% this year. This amounts to £878.6 billion, a record level of spending more than 8% higher than last year. No department will face any cuts next year, with every part of government receiving at least an inflationary rise in spending. That's what I mean by the end of austerity, Mr Javid said, seeking to fulfil Theresa May's pledge to do just that in the then Prime Minister's speech to the Conservative Party conference last October. Thanks to the difficult decisions we took and the hard work of the British people, we can now afford to turn the page on austerity, he said. So austerity is now over. Now bear in mind, public sector debt still continues to grow. We've only slowed the rate at which it grows. We've only basically slowed the deficit itself. The total debt is still bigger than ever. Let's take a look at the chart, as this is public sector debt as a total. Now it is flattening off as a percentage of GDP. That's because the economy is growing. But as you see, like, there's barely any dent. This decade of austerity has barely made any dent. Overall, it just continues to grow year on year. So this austerity is largely a joke. You know, the day of reckoning is coming. If we continue down this road, look, bearing in mind, the Tory party are the only large party we have that is prepared to potentially do the right thing and cut debts, but now they're turning their backs on it. You know, people talk about Thatcher, worst Prime Minister ever, because, you know, she took a sledgehammer to public spending. You know, she didn't really. If you even look through the Thatcher years, public sector net debt continued to grow. So this is it. This is the one party we basically have to reduce public sector spending is turning their backs on it. So you can almost guarantee now at some point in the future there will be a bond crisis, there will be a financial collapse coming, because how can we continue to roll over these debts, these ever increasing debts? You know, at some point interest rates have to rise. If they don't rise, then that just means inflation's going to get out of control, and that comes with its own problems. If they are serious about being a financially sensible government, at some point in the future interest rates will have to rise. Then how do they roll over debts in that scenario? So I had a bit of free time this morning. I did fire off a email to Mr Javid. We'll see if he replies to this one. I sent Boris Johnson an email a few weeks ago. He didn't reply to that one, but Boris Johnson is the PM, so he's probably getting loads of emails from pro-Brexiteers, from anti-Brexiteers. We'll see if Javid comes back with anything. This is an email fired off to him just this morning. Dear Mr Javid, thank you for taking the time to read this email. I see in today's news that under your guidance as Chancellor, the Conservative Party is moving away from attempting to rein in government spending to now more or less turning on the spending taps. Well, this is no doubt a vote winner with most of the public. I, as well as other fiscal conservatives, are worried of the long-term consequences. With public sector debt, excluding unfunded liabilities, approaches £2 trillion. Have yourself or the Bank of England run risk models of what happens if interest rates rise to control future inflation? Historical interest rates in the UK are in the 5 to 7% range. Will the UK be able to continue servicing and rolling over debt if interest rates rise to such a level? I'll give you the answer. It's basically no, that we won't be able to roll over debt if interest rates get to that level. But we'll see what he says about that anyway. I also fear that this increased government spending will do little to boost GDP. We have lived under ultra-loose monetary policy of near zero interest rates and quantitative easing for the last decade, with little increase in production or growth. In my opinion, more spending will do little to support future growth. My biggest fear is we get to where bonds fail to be sold on the market and the Bank of England becomes the only buyer. The other outcome would be interest rates rising to a point to which the country can no longer service its debt and we are insolvent. Either situation would clearly be magnified from a debt to GDP ratio view, since in either scenario, government spending, which clearly is a significant part of GDP, would have to be severely slashed back, adding to the economic crash that would take place. I hope you can allay my fears. Yours sincerely, Liberty Bunker. So we'll see if he comes back with anything from that. Now, this is quite worrying. Obviously, this is a huge vote winner. You know, the average person in the street doesn't care about the coming bond crisis because you know they don't understand. They don't teach these things at school. You're not really going to hear about on the BBC 6 o'clock news. So the average person in the street wants more funding for police, education, NHS, all the good stuff that just buys votes. But essentially, as that is buying votes, it kicks the can down the road. Long term, this is very worrying because the Tory party essentially our only hope at reining in government spending. We actually need to bring the debt down. Don't worry about the deficit. Don't just worry about how much it's growing each year. The real thing, we need to bring this debt down. Basically, these debts are almost certainly never going to be paid back. That means there'll be a huge crisis at some point in the future. They'll either try and monetize the debt by just getting inflation to such a point that the government can actually pay back £2 trillion, because maybe a loaf of bread will be £1 billion, right? If you get to inflation at that point, then yes, they can pay back the debts because it's paying back in printed money. Or the bond market just refuses to carry on buying bonds at these low interest rates levels. Clearly at the moment, bonds pay a lower amount. There's a lower interest on bonds than the actual rate of inflation. So in real terms, bonds are negative. Even in nominal terms, it can be negative. So it's very worrying times. We'll see what the Tory party do about this. I mean, long term, you just need to protect your own wealth. Don't be too overexposed to pound sterling. Don't be too exposed to any fiat currency, in my opinion, because it's not just the UK doing this. America's doing this. Europe's doing this. Most Western countries and some Asian countries as well are going down this nonsensical road, in my opinion. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on this. Are we going to have a bond crisis? Will there be high inflation? How will this play out? Will we honour our debts? Will we just at some point in the future say, hey, look, we're going to run huge budget surpluses. We're going to scrap the NHS. We're going to scrap welfare. We're not going to pay old people pensions, and we're going to actually honour our debts. That's very unlikely because that's a quick way to lose an election, right? Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one. Jason from Liberty Bunkers signing off, and I'll see you in the next video.